بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على ولعنة الله على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Respected scholars, elders, my dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before we begin our reflection on Surah Yusuf, of course, it would not be appropriate for me to continue the lecture without making a few comments about al-Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba salawatullahi alayhi. In the ziyarah that we have, which is mentioned in Mafatih al-Jinan, specifically the ziyarat of the Ahlul Bayt that are designated throughout the week. There is a special ziyarah that we recite every Monday whereby we visit Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Husayn alayhimus salam. One of the lines of the ziyarah that we recite when we address Imam al-Hasan is as follows. We address the Imam by saying, Assalamu alayka ayyuha al-alimu bit-ta'wil. Peace be upon you, O the knower of interpretation. It's interesting, and this is how we can connect it to our discussion about Surah Yusuf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored Yusuf. He bestowed upon Yusuf a special type of knowledge, and that is ta'wilul ahadith. Allah Azza wa Jal granted Yusuf the ability to interpret dreams, ta'wilul ahlam, ta'wilul ahadith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights this special knowledge throughout Surah Yusuf. But what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave all of our Imams, and especially Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, is that He gave him the best type of knowledge. And that is not just simply the ta'wil of ahadith, but he taught Rasulullah and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt ta'wilul Quran. And the interpretation of the Quran is the most beneficial knowledge. It's the loftiest of knowledge. So the best way that we can commemorate and celebrate the legacy of Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba is to do exactly what we're doing, which is to reflect on the ayat of the Quran. وَصَلُّوا عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. We reached ayah 77 of Surah Yusuf, where Yusuf alayhi salam had organized a plan to keep Binyamin in Egypt. As we mentioned last night, according to ancient Egyptian law, non-Egyptians are not permitted to stay in Egypt. They can visit, but they have to leave. They cannot take up residence in Egypt. Yusuf knows that the only way to bring his father from Canaan is that he has to hold on to the most precious child that he has left, and that is Binyamin. And therefore, what he does is he places this cup of the king in the saddlebag of Binyamin. And naturally, when the siqaya of the king, when the cup, the goblet of the king is missing, the assumption is that these camel riders, they stole it. And the crime for theft, according to the Sharia of Ibrahim at that time, according to the Sharia that was taught by Yaqub, and it's very interesting that the guards, they asked the brothers who were denying theft, they were denying that they had stolen anything. They are asked, what should be your punishment if you're lying? If in fact one of you stole the king's goblet, what should be the punishment? So they explain the punishment that is given to thieves in Canaan, in Palestine, which is in accordance with the Abrahamic law of that time, which is if someone steals, the punishment is that they become a slave to the person that they stole from. And this is precisely what happens. It is discovered that the king's goblet is in the saddlebag of Binyamin. Ayah 77 gives us the reaction to this stunning revelation. قالوا إن سرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل. Allahu Akbar. The brothers, look at the jealousy that is still, the hostility and the malice they have towards Yusuf even after all of these decades. They say if he has stolen, if Binyamin has indeed stolen, it's not a surprise to us because a brother of his stole in the past. Notice, they don't say our brother. They don't even mention Yusuf. They say a brother of his. It's as if they're saying, we are a group of brothers. We come from different mothers, but this Binyamin and his brother, they're the problem. They're the bad apples in our family. Now, the question is, why do the brothers say this? What do they mean that Yusuf stole before? There are two interpretations here. One interpretation is that it was just a blatant lie. They just lied. Individuals who are capable of contemplating murdering their brother, it's not going to be difficult for them to lie. It's a very minor sin compared to what they've done. So one opinion is that this was just a lie. Another view is what we find in a narration from Imam Rida alayhi salam, where he says, Yusuf alayhi salam had a paternal aunt, the sister of Yaqub, and she was very attached to Yusuf. She loved her nephew. She was obsessed with him. So she wanted to keep Yusuf at her home. She wanted Yusuf to live with her. She wanted to raise him. And therefore she thought to herself that the only way for me to keep Yusuf is to make it look like he stole something from my house. The family of Yaqub, they had a precious family heirloom, which was the belt of Ibrahim that was passed down from one generation to another. So this belt, which was the belt of Ibrahim, it was passed down to Ishaq, then passed down to Yaqub. This belt was in the home of Yusuf's aunt, the sister of Yaqub. So he stays the night at her home and he's preparing to go back to his father. So she attaches the belt to Yusuf. And she tells her brother that just go along with this story. Let me accuse him of taking it. So according to our law, he has to be my servant. He has to stay with me. So from this story, from his childhood, the brothers, they use this as a line of attack against Yusuf. Remember the belt that you stole from our aunt? In fact, he didn't steal it. His aunt was trying to do this to justify why she wanted to keep Yusuf in our home. In any case, whether it's the first interpretation or the second, the point is that they are accusing Yusuf of stealing when in fact he didn't steal anything. He was innocent. Look at the composure and the patience and the discipline of Yusuf. He is at the height of his power. These are the same brothers who left him for dead, and they're still talking about him. What does Allah say? فَأَسَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ. Yusuf, he kept it to himself. He didn't say anything. He didn't respond to that accusation. It's interesting. When it came to the case of Zulaykha, he defended himself. But here, he doesn't defend himself because this accusation is not going to do any real harm. He's selective about his battles. He chooses his battles wisely. If he were to say at this moment, I'm Yusuf, it would have spoiled his master plan to reunite the family. فَأَسَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ وَلَمْ يُبْدِهَا لَهُمْ. Not only did he not say anything, Yusuf has so much control of his emotions that even the expressions on his face, you couldn't tell that he was even bothered by that comment. Complete control over his nafs. So the brothers, they begin begging. Again, up until this point, they don't know that this is their brother. They think he's the minister of agriculture. So ayah 78, the brothers begin begging. قالوا يا أيها العزيز. Aziz was an honorific title given to these high government officials. It's the equivalent of saying, Your Excellency. Right? So Yusuf grows up in the house of Aziz. He was the minister of finance. Yusuf now is also called Aziz because he's the minister of agriculture and food distribution. What do they say to Yusuf? قالوا يا أيها العزيز إن له شيخا كبيرا. O Aziz, O minister, he, Binyamin, he has an elderly father. So have mercy on his father. They say, he has a Shaykh who is kabir. Now, Shaykh could mean elderly, but it could also mean that the father of this young man is the leader of a tribe. He's a very important person. He's a very prominent person. And he's elderly. So what do they propose? فَخُذْ أَحَدَنَا مَكَانًا. Take one of us in his place. If you're going to take someone as a slave, let it be one of us. إِنَّا نَرَاكَ مِنَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. We see you as a righteous person. We see you as a reasonable person. Ayah 79 is the response of Yusuf. قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ. God forbid. أَن نَأْخُذَ إِلَّا مَنْ وَجَدْنَا مَتَاعَنَا عِنْدَهِ إِنَّا إِذًا لَظَالِمُونَ. God forbid that we take anyone but him with whom we found our property. Look at the wording of Yusuf. He doesn't say, we will only keep the one who stole. Yusuf uses his words very carefully. He doesn't accuse Binyamin of stealing. He says, we have to keep the one in whom we found the property. He's very careful with his words. He doesn't lie. If we were to do so, if we were to exchange the one in whose saddle we found the king's cup with someone else, this would be unfair. On what grounds are we holding the person who doesn't have the king's cup in his saddlebag? So the brothers are begging, they're pleading with Yusuf, but he's not budging. Ayah number 80. فَلَمَّا اسْتَيْأَسُوا مِنْهُ. When the brothers lost hope in convincing the Aziz, who was Yusuf, of releasing their brother, خَلَصُوا نَجِيًّا. The brothers, they come together and they form a huddle and they start to converse privately. What do they say? قَالَ كَبِيرُهُمْ. Subhanallah. Look at the beauty of the Quran. The eldest brother starts to speak. This is the only time in the story where Allah identifies which brother it is. Why? Because he is going to express remorse, which is a praiseworthy quality. In the beginning of the story, when they were scheming and plotting to hurt their brother, قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ لَا تَقْتُلُوا يُوسُفَ. One of them said, don't kill Yusuf, but throw him in the well. Throwing him in the well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's bad. It's blameworthy. Allah conceals the identity of the person who's doing something wrong. But now that one of the brothers is beginning his process of tawbah, Allah identifies the doer of a praiseworthy deed. He says, the eldest brother. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works with His servants. In the dua, what do we say? Ya man أظهر الجميل وستر القبيح. Allah is the one who exposes that which is good. He reveals the identity of those who do good, and He conceals the identity of those who do evil. قال كبيرهم ألم تعلموا أن أباكم قد أخذ عليكم موثقا من الله. The eldest brother says, don't you guys realize that we made an oath to our father that we have to bring back Binyamin? وَمِن قَبْلُ مَا فَرَّطْتُمْ فِي يُوسُفَ. We made an oath to our father to bring back Binyamin. And remember how we fell short with our promise with respect to Yusuf? Look at what we've done. We failed on both counts. We've lost both of our brothers. So what does the brother say? فَلَنْ أَبْرَحَ الْأَرْضَ حَتَّى يَأْذَنَ لِي أَبِي أَوْ يَحْكُمَ اللَّهُ لِي وَهُوَ خَيْرُ الْحَاكِمِينَ. The eldest brother says, this is terrible. I am going to self-exile. I'm not leaving Egypt. I'm never going to go back. I'm going to stay here. He imposed a very harsh penalty on himself. He's basically saying that I am going to live in Egypt as an illegal alien. Basically, you're risking imprisonment. I don't care. I am not going to go back home. I promised my father that I was going to bring Binyamin back, so I'm going to stay here unless my father gives me permission to go back or Allah decrees something. Either God decrees death for me or some misfortune happens, but I'm not going back. So, in ayah 81, the eldest brother who has self-exiled, he's going to stay in Egypt. He says to the other brothers in ayah 81, "Irji'u ila abikum." You guys go back to your father. فَقُولُوا يَا أَبَانَا إِنَّ ابْنَكَ سَرَقَ. Go and tell him, O father, your son. You know, subhanAllah, when the brothers are speaking about the crimes of their siblings, it's always your son. It's not our brother. You know, have you ever seen parents when their kids make mistakes or they do things that are very, inappropriate or displeasing? The mother will say to the father, your son. He's your son. And the father will be like, your son, your daughter. They try to distance themselves. So go back to our father and say that your son stole. إِنَّ ابْنَكَ سَرَقَ وَمَا شَهِدْنَا إِلَّا بِمَا عَلِمْنَا. The reason, when we gave a testimony, we were asked, what is the crime for theft? We gave a testimony based on what we knew about the crime for theft. We did not know that the crime, the punishment was applicable to us. We just testified based on what we knew of our Sharia. وَمَا كُنَّا لِلْغَيْبِ حَافِظِينَ. We did not have knowledge of the unseen, that it would be one of our own brothers who's going to steal, and this punishment is going to be imposed upon him. So, 9 brothers, they go back. So who's left in Egypt now? Binyamin, and the eldest brother, which according to some reports was Reuben. The eldest brother stays. 9 brothers, they go back. And you can imagine how distressing that journey was back home. 18 days of travel, and they have to go and break the news to their father that we don't have Binyamin with us. They were probably genuinely worried that he's probably going to die if we tell him now that Binyamin is not here. So they arrive back in Canaan. Ayah 82, they're trying to explain to their father what happened. But do they have a good track record with their father? They have a bad track record with their father. They have a record of dishonesty with their father. So their father does not believe them. The story doesn't make sense. It sounds as fantastical as the wolf eating Yusuf. He doesn't believe them. Ayah 82, you can tell that the father does not believe them. وَاسْأَلَ الْقَرْيَةَ الَّتِي كُنَّا فِيهَا. Oh Father, if you don't believe us, ask the people of the city that we were in Egypt. Ask. And they'll tell you what happened. They'll tell you that the goblet of the king was found in the saddlebag of Binyamin. واسأل القرية التي كنا فيها والعير التي أقبلنا فيها. Either ask the residents of the city in Egypt that we were in, or ask these caravans that are returning from Egypt. Ask them, and they will tell you what happened. Ayah 83, subhanallah, the response of Yaqub is almost identical to the response they gave when they told him about what happened to Yusuf. قَالَ بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا. He says that you have fooled yourselves. He doesn't believe them. What do you mean Binyamin stole the king's goblet? I know my son. I know Binyamin like I knew Yusuf. What do you mean he stole? He would never steal. I raised him with my own hands. He would never steal. Now, why does he say that you guys are foolish? For a number of reasons. Number one, Yaqub says to them that, why didn't you challenge the accusation? They simply found the king's goblet in Binyamin's saddlebag. That's called circumstantial evidence. Were there 2 witnesses that saw him steal it? Did he confess that he stole it? So why did you accept circumstantial evidence as conclusive evidence? There should have been witnesses. Maybe it fell in. Why did you accept that flimsy evidence? This is number one. Number two, you are in Egypt. Why would you tell them the punishment that we give in Canaan? At least listen to what the punishment is in that land to see if it's more severe or less severe. And why would you commit yourself to a punishment that if it is implemented, it would prevent you from fulfilling your oath to your father? And finally, you guys are foolish. You guys all should have stayed in Egypt, like your older brother. Why did you come back? I told you not to come back without Binyamin. But it happened. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. Subhanallah. You would think that his patience would have run out after all of these years. He said, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ when Yusuf was taken away from him. You would think that now my second son, it's like when you lose one child and you have to bury another child. Many people, they would lose patience. But look at the patience of Yaqub. He says, I will still have sabr. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. And then what does he say? He says, عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَأْتِيَنِي بِهِمْ جَمِيعًا. He says, perhaps Allah will bring them all back to me. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ. At this moment, ayah 84, وَتَوَلَّى عَنْهُمْ. Yaqub has now lost his two most beloved sons. You remember, this entire story began with the brothers trying to get rid of Yusuf because they wanted the attention of their father. They were trying to achieve something halal through haram means. They wanted to commit a sin to get attention from their father. But what happened? وَتَوَلَّى عَنْهُمْ. He turned away from them. Even what they were seeking, they didn't achieve. Because Allah will never make sinful people successful. Yes, they might gain a short-term advantage, but in the end they will lose, they will fail. وَتَوَلَّى عَنْهُمْ وَقَالَ يَا أَسَفَا عَلَى يُوسُف. He just lost Binyamin. But he turns away and he says, oh, my sorrow for Yusuf. وَبِيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. And he loses, his eyes become weakened as a result of the tears, as a result of the anguish. There's a beautiful narration where one of the servants of Imam Zain al-Abidin, he says, one day I saw Ali ibn al-Hussein in sujood, and he was crying over his father Imam al-Hussein. This was post Karbala. It had been decades since Karbala. So this khadim of the Imam, he says, Ya Ali ibn al-Hussein. He says to him, أَمَا آنَ لِحُزْنِكَ أَن يَنْقَضِي. Isn't it time for your anguish and your grief to subside? You know, as the saying goes, time heals all. Isn't it time for you to move on? Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, the narration says, he lifts his head from sujood. فَقَالَ وَيْلَكَ. He rebukes his servant and he says, وَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ شَكَى يَعْقُوبْ إِلَى رَبِّهِ. I swear by Allah that Ya'qub complained to his Lord. فِي أَقَلِّ مِمَّا رَأَيْتُهُ حِينَ قَالَ يَا أَسَفَا عَلَى يُوسُف. Imam al-Sajjad said that Ya'qub complained to Allah after he experienced a calamity that was much less than my calamity. And he cried out, oh, my sorrow for Yusuf. While Ya'qub, he only lost one son. His son was missing. Ya'qub knew his son was alive. But he cried and he grieved until he lost his sight over the pain of just being away from Yusuf. He says, the Imam alayhi salam says, وَأَنَا رَأَيْتُ أَبِي وَجَمَاعَةَ أَهْلِ بَيْتِي يُذْبَحُونَ حَوْلِي. When I'm crying, I'm not crying over a sibling that I have lost or the disappearance of a loved one. What I witnessed was not what Ya'qub witnessed. Ya'qub was missing Yusuf. I saw my father and my family members slaughtered in front of me. So if Ya'qub can say, Ya asafa ala Yusuf, don't blame me for saying, Ya asafa ala Abi Abdullah, Ya asafa ala Zainab, Ya asafa ala Aliyun al-Akbar. Don't blame me. He wept because of the pain of separation. I saw the heads of my beloveds separated from their bodies. So, Ya'qub alayhi salam, he spends the next few weeks mourning Binyamin and Yusuf privately. Now his sons, subhanallah, they're still haunted by the memory of Yusuf. and they still feel the jealousy towards Yusuf. In ayah 85, قالوا تالله تفتأ تذكر يوسف حتى تكون حرضا أو تكون من الهالكين. By God, by Allah, it seems you will never cease thinking of Yusuf until you lose your health or you even lose your life. Ayah 86, this is the response of Yaqub. قال إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله. I complain of my anguish. I complain of my grief, not to you guys. I'm not complaining to you. I'm complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this shows us that complaining to Allah does not negate your sabr. Allah is there. If there's anyone that you want to vent to, if there's anyone that you can complain to, that you are rewarded for complaining to, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And I know from Allah what you don't know. Remember, the brothers were not told the dream of Yusuf. They don't know about the dream. Who knows about the dream? Yaqub knows about the dream. And Yaqub knows that the dream has yet to be fulfilled. So Yaqub alayhi salam, he's the one who confirmed the ta'weel of the dream for Yusuf. Because the dream hasn't been fulfilled, Yaqub knows that my Yusuf is still alive. He knew that the dream wasn't fulfilled. He knew that Yusuf is somewhere, but he's alive. And then what does he say to his sons in ayah 87? يا بني يذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه. Oh my sons, go back to Egypt. فتحسسوا, not just for Binyamin. I don't want you to go and just passively wait for news. I want you to actively search for both Yusuf and Binyamin. وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. And do not despair of, the translation is mercy, but Yaqub uses the word rawh Allah. Mercy is general, but rawh is a mercy that comes, it's a relief that comes to a person after they have suffered immensely. Yaqub is basically saying that the faraj is near. The relief from Allah, that special mercy from Allah, don't despair of it. إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. The only people who despair of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are al-kafirun, those who don't know God. Look at the severity. What a grave sin losing hope in Allah is. Yaqub says the one who loses hope in Allah, this is tantamount to kufr. Don't lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yaqub, after all of these years, you would think he would be the bitter, depressed, hopeless father. But he is the one who is inspiring hope. He doesn't only have hope, he has hope, and he's inspiring hope in his sons. So the brothers now begin their third journey back to Egypt, and inshallah tomorrow will be our last session, and this is where Yusuf alayhi salam will finally reveal himself to his brothers, and we will inshallah discuss the fulfillment of the dream that he had when he was a little boy. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.